Good morning. I'm so glad to see you guys. Thank you for coming and listening to your lesson for this week. We are going to continue on our story about Moses. Last week we talked about how God spoke to him from a burning bush. That was pretty crazy. God was telling him that he needed to go tell the Mino Pharaoh that he had to let the Israelites go. He was not treating them very well. So Moses, after talking with God about it a little bit, finally said, okay, I'll go. And he went with his brother Aaron, and they went off to Egypt to talk to the Pharaoh about letting the Israelites go. So that's where we're going to pick up today. So Moses and Aaron went, and they met with the Pharaoh. That's the king of Egypt. He was not nice. He was very mean to the Israelites and was making them work really hard. So Moses went to tell him, look, God has spoken to me, and he is telling you, you have got to let his people go. So the Israelites were God's people. So he told him, God said, you have got to let his people go. And Pharaoh's like, who is this God that you're talking about that I have to listen to? No, I'm not going to let them go. And a matter of fact, since you've said this to me, their work is going to be even harder. So we are going to talk a little bit more about how that went. We are actually still in the book of Exodus, like last week. We are going to be in Exodus 5. So go ahead and get your Bibles and go to Exodus 5 for me. And you can read along and even read a little bit more than what I'll be telling you. So Exodus 5, like last week, it's the second book of the Bible. Really easy to find. So you can go there and read along. So now Moses has told the Pharaoh this first time, hey, you've got to let the people go. God told me to tell you, you have got to let them go. And the Pharaoh said, nope, not going to do it. They're going to work even harder now. So he made the Israelites work even harder, longer days, just awful, awful treatment that they were getting. Do you think that the Israelites were now happy that Moses was there? No, they were not happy that Moses was there, because now that he showed up and talked to the Pharaoh, now they have to work even harder, all because Moses went and talked to them. So now they were mad at Moses. What a crazy situation. So finally, Moses came back to the Pharaoh and he said, you know, now that you've done this, God's going to start making your life a lot harder, and all because you won't let his people go. So I'm telling you right now, God's going to start doing some stuff. You're not going to like it. It would be a whole lot better for you if you let the Israelites go. So Pharaoh, okay, sure, go on, because I'm not letting those people go. So after that, all this crazy stuff started happening. God sent all these things, like he was turning the water that they had into blood, which was really crazy and weird. Nobody had ever seen anything like that. It was really scary. So the Egyptians they didn't understand, but the Israelites' water was fine. God was protecting them, but the Egyptians that were not being nice and not letting them go, they had terrible water. So after that, he sent frogs, he sent all kinds of bugs that ate all the plants and all of their food, and then the Egyptians, their animals died, and just all this stuff, these terrible things happened, but the Israelites were fine. They had food to eat, their animals were fine. God was protecting his people. But the Egyptians were just having all this stuff happen, and they couldn't believe it and didn't understand. And every single time one of these things happened, Moses came back to the Pharaoh and he said, you have got to let the people go so this ends. And the Pharaoh every time said, no, I'm not letting these people go. Tell your God to bring the worst. he was not a very smart guy. So Moses said, okay, I don't want this to continue to happen, but we'll see what God does. So God sent over a large darkness that covered Egypt and sent them for 3 days, and they couldn't see what was in front of their face, and that was very scary. So the Pharaoh called Moses and he said, make this stop right now. And Moses said, you have to let the people go. The Pharaoh said, I'm not doing it. I'm not letting the people go. So then the final thing that God did to try to get the Pharaoh to finally let the people go is all of the firstborn sons died. And the Pharaoh happened to have a firstborn son, and he died. And the Pharaoh finally understood. And he said, okay, Moses, go in peace. Leave me. So Moses gathered all of the Israelites, and they went off into the wilderness. And Moses reminded them, he said, always remember this day. Always remember that it's God that saved you from this. This is God that gave you this freedom. He delivered you from the Egyptians. Always remember that. It was him. So they followed him into the wilderness, and the Egyptians were not very happy about their slaves just leaving like that. So they all went to the Pharaoh and they said, what are you doing? Why are we letting them go? And the Pharaoh was so angry, he said, you know what? Let's go get them. So they got into all these chariots and they started following in the direction that they went. And they heard them coming, and Moses and the Israelites heard them coming in the wilderness, and they looked at Moses and they said, why did we leave? Just so that they can come here and hurt us too. What's happening? So Moses, follow me. And God led him to the Red Sea. And they didn't understand. Well, now we have this large body of water. We can't all swim across this. What are we going to do? We're trapped. They're coming behind us. The sea's in front of us. What do we do? So God told Moses, I'll part the sea for you. And he did. He parted the sea completely. And in the very bottom, where the mud should have been, it was dry dirt. All of this water had just gotten lifted off of it, and the dirt was completely dry. It was as if it had never been wet. It's amazing. So he parted the sea, and here they go. The Israelites are walking, and they've got big, large bodies of water on each side of them. Can you imagine looking to the side and you see fish and sharks and all kinds of stuff just floating next to you, and while you're walking across this very big sea? So they walk across it, and they finally get to the end of it, to the other side, and they look behind them, and here comes those chariots and all of the Egyptians trying to get them. Well, they come into the sea also, taking the same path that the Israelites did, and Moses turns around, and God makes the sea go back to the way it was and washed out all of the Egyptians, and he saved them from the Egyptians that day. So what else for them to do? But the Israelites started singing and praising God that he had really truly saved them. And they were so happy. And now they continue on their journey to go to this wonderful land that God had promised to give them. And we can't wait to see what happens with that. So that's our lesson today. Super exciting. I love that part where the sea just parts and God made a way for them. He always makes a way for us. We just trust and obey him and do what he says, and turn to him whenever we have trouble come our way, and he will always part that sea for us and give us dry land to walk on. So thank you so much for coming today. I'm so excited I got to see you, and we can't wait to see you back here in a little while. we'll do the next part of the lesson for you next week, and we will see you guys then. See you later.